Earlier this year, Suzuki showed us that they were getting a lot more serious with their mid-capacity adventure motorcycles with the launch of the V-Strom 800DE. Now this motorcycle of course is priced at 10 lakh 30,000 rupees, and it is of course the successor to the V-Strom 650 XT, which was already sold out here in the country a couple of years ago. Now obviously this motorcycle has evolved in and improved over that motorcycle in terms of features and capability. Elsewhere abroad, you do have the option of getting your hands on the standard version of this motorcycle, which is the V-Strom 800 standard, but that is a more road focused motorcycle, and Suzuki have chosen not to give us that one but the more off-road centric 800DE version. Now I have had the opportunity to have gotten my hands on the Honda XL 750 Transalp recently, which is a direct competitor to this particular machine, and I am going to be making a couple of reference points throughout the course of this review. So without wasting any more time, let's see what this one has to offer. The V-Strom 800DE looks brilliant in this outstanding yellow color. It's got all the definitive cuts, creases and design cues that visually sync it in line nicely with the rest of the latest gen V-Strom bikes. There's an undeniable mass up front with all those plastic panels, but it gives the motorcycle a visual sturdiness that still manages to be easy on the eye. Now the V-Strom 800DE, obviously it does look very big and bulky, and that mostly has to do with the big 20-litre tank up front. So it's not as slender as something like the Transalp, and once you actually get on the bike, well, it still does feel a little imposing, and it will take a little more time to get used to because of the size and the weight, and it does feel a little top heavy in comparison to the Honda. It doesn't feel as balanced, and obviously because of that weight, it will take a little more muscling to get around, especially off-road. Now once you get astride, because of the shape of the seat, you'll feel like you're seated within the V-Strom 800DE rather than just on it, and that's not a bad feeling, to be honest. But it also tells you that this motorcycle was designed to be comfortable over long rides and in the city rather than set up for some hardcore off-road grinds in the stock setup. Seat height is at around 855 mm, which shorter riders might find a bit of a task. And the weight of the bike is 232 kgs, which is just 5 kgs off the weight of the latest BMW R1300 GS. Now for sure, the German R&D team have worked some serious magic with the latest GS, but still, the Japanese bike out here today doesn't have as much power and still doesn't house as much features as the larger capacity motorcycle, but roughly weighs around as much, which is a bit of a head scratcher in a way. But still, what's outstanding about this motorcycle has to be its engine. It's so smooth, tractable and refined all throughout. Suzuki have done an outstanding job setting it up the way it is. Now the parallel twin engine out here is the same 776cc liquid-cooled unit that powers other street bikes around the world, at least the modern day Suzukis. Now yes, the 83 PS of max power might seem a bit modest on paper compared to something like the 92 PS of max power that the Honda Transalp produces, but then again, this engine still is a load of fun out on the road, and that's because it makes around 78 Nm of max torque, and it is available very low down the power band, and it gives this engine, this whole motorcycle, a lot of character, a lot of fun. It makes it a lot more exciting, especially off the line and when you're off-road. On road, it may lack a powerful top-end whack of something like the Transalp, but that's just because the Honda motor feels so relentless in its power delivery higher up the power band. Because, well, that's the way it's configured. There's a good amount of power in the Suzuki motor too, just that you'll have to really ring it to catch up to the Honda if the two of you are in a sprint race out on the road. Off-road though, things will be very different. The Suzuki motor has more grunt on offer and the electronics manage it all very well. Speaking of off-road scenarios, what deserves a mention is this bike's suspension setup, because it isn't often that you see a completely adjustable upside down fork and rear monoshock on a stock medium capacity motorcycle. There's quite a good amount of stock crash protection on there as well. Some really nice bits about the V-Strom 800D are the fact that you do get a good amount of features in terms of guards. Now you have crash guards in the form of the knuckle guards, and that bash plate, although it's plastic, well, something's better than nothing, right? And of course you do get this small fly screen up front which is adjustable, but then again you will have to use the Allen keys to actually adjust it the way you like. Then in terms of underpinnings, very impressive for a mid-capacity motorcycle because you do get fully adjustable Showa suspension units at the front and at the rear. That is an upside down fork, and it is adjustable for preload, compression and rebound like the rear. And at the rear you also have this nice clicker, which is quite convenient for the preload at least. Very impressive. But then what really isn't is the fact that you do have tube tires on the wheels. Now that's an impressive 21-inch spoked wheel up front, a rather small 17-inch wheel at the rear, but then again you do have tubed Dunlop Duramax tires at both ends. Now tube tires on an ADV bike, not that great. Now if that sounds familiar, well, you might have heard me say the same thing about the Honda Transalp, because that too comes with the same tires, although that gets a slightly bigger 18-inch wheel at the rear. But then again, tube tires on an off-road vehicle doesn't really cut it for me, because if you happen to, in the eventuality of you getting a puncture out on the road or off on your trails, well, you are going to be really perplexed as to how to fix that out in the open. So that's a big downer for me. The suspension weighs up brilliantly out on the road, and you can set it up the way you want off-road too, which is great. But the Dunlop tires on there are a big letdown on this bike. Now I felt that the stock Honda Transalp, which has the same tires, is a motorcycle that is set up more for road usage rather than actual off-road rough stuff. And the V-Strom 800DE doesn't do the exact opposite. Just that it doesn't feel as punchy out on the highway, but it feels more capable off-road. And these tires though, off-road at least, over the relatively light, mushy stuff that I subjected it to today, were a big disappointment. Not very point your toes and go. It's got a nice narrow midsection which allows you to stand up and get a good grip and feel of things. And the handlebar is nice and wide, which gives you good amount of leverage. And the engine as well, enough grunt to get you out of sticky situations. But the V-Strom, well, it still feels top heavy, which can be tricky when things go awry off-road. It's got a decent amount of ground clearance as well, but I should mention that the quick shifter which comes standard with the 800DE is an absolute delight to employ. In fact, even the electronic suite on there is really good. And all the riding aids, everything functions just as you would expect it to. So in terms of ride features, you do get a decent amount of them, because you have 5 levels of traction control, you have 3 ride modes which alter the way the power is delivered to the rear wheel, and you also have switchable ABS, which is great for when you're hitting those off-road trails. So as an off-road centric motorcycle, it's got just about enough of what you actually need in terms of usability. Overall, the V-Strom 800DE is a lovely machine that's built to take on all kinds of riding scenarios. It's just that when you're on the road, you'll find that it disguises its weight rather well and feels effortless to ride. When you're off the beaten path though, there will be times when it will require you to put some muscle into it. It doesn't feel as balanced as the Transalp at all times, but that's not to say that the V-Strom isn't capable of pulling through, just that you'll have to cope up a little more. The more serious you are about off-road riding, well, the more you'll want to swap out these stock Dunlop tires. But for regular city and long distance touring, they should be just fine. Now on its own, the Suzuki V-Strom 800DE is a very well put together motorcycle, considering that it is a lot more off-road biased. So in terms of suspension, the comfort levels, the ride and everything, even the features, it really syncs together quite well. But then again, it is slightly on the heavier side, so larger riders will really fancy this one a lot more. And once you get used to the weight and you're more in tune with off-road riding, you will really fancy this one with the amount of torque that this delivers. Now, of course, it is around half a lakh cheaper than something like the Honda XL750 Transalp, but that motorcycle comes with a lot more features. It is the more rider-friendly and more road-friendly as well of the two. But then again, this one, anything away from this engine, because it is a real hoot. It doesn't shy away from any excitement, and you will have a lot of fun in this one as well.